Meaning is everywhere, and the fact that it's everywhere is what tends to confuse people. What I want to talk about today is how meaning applies equally and just as importantly to our home life as it does to our work life and in terms of our life in our community. So let's get straight down to it. What I mean by meaning is everywhere is that we go looking for meaning in our lives and we think to ourselves like, my life's got to have some meaning. I need some meaning behind everything I do. And that kind of throws the baby out with the bathwater, because you see, there is meaning in so many parts of your life that you probably don't even realize it. But looking for the grand scheme of things meaning, like the meaning of my life, well, that kind of throws you off because it's so massive and it's puzzled people for millennia. And you probably think to yourself, well, who am I to solve this for myself? And no one's been able to solve it yet. They kind of have, but we'll come back to that again later. So you don't need to go looking for the big thing. The big thing about meaning is that it is everywhere and it's all around us. It's when your physical life matches your thoughts and they are consistent with your actions. Now, within that, if you wrap that around a community, then it gets even stronger again. So let's look not at a community for the time being, let's look at a community of one, when your physical and your thoughts and your actions all come together. Not long ago, actually now it is many years ago, I remember when my daughter first started kindergarten. Now my daughter ended up going to the same primary school that I did. I walked her into the class and she sat in the same classroom that I sat in when I was in kindy. It was remarkable. Now I don't know if you've ever had this feeling of like you have something from your past just thump into you and all of these feelings come back to you. I remember sitting in that tiny little desk feeling the same sort of emotions that I'd forgotten about. I looked out the window and it was the same view. I could see the same mountain in the distance. Even more bizarrely, there were 3 other people there who also went to kindergarten with me and their kids went to kindergarten the same day. That was kind of bizarre, but that happened. Now, what's interesting is that this, for one person, that feeling that I got, what it meant for me was very unique to me. And not even my past classmates would have had the same feeling that I had. And it wouldn't have meant to them the same as it meant to me. Now, here's the thing about meaning is that at the time, when I was a kid, I obviously had no idea that I was like, this thing was going to be formative in my life. I was just a kindergarten kid. And even in my adult life, I never thought back to kindergarten. And while I sat there, I couldn't assign any great meaning to that year in kindergarten. But I know that it was a formative year in my life. It was one of the building blocks that created this person who is here now. And the same would have happened to you. So it did mean something to me, although I can't really put my finger on it. And that meaning, that feeling of meaning came washing all over me while I was sitting in the classroom. So that's one. And there are gazillions of examples of that. In 2, it happens when with a married couple or with best friends. And have you ever had the feeling where you walk past a restaurant and you look at your partner and you say to each other, remember when we used to go there prior kids or whenever? And you both get this communal feeling of what that felt like. You had your individual feelings, but they also came together, they coalesced into a little group meaning. It meant something to you guys. Another friend walking with you would never understand that meaning and you could never place them into it. So it can happen at 1, it can happen at 2, and it can happen all the way through in different layers in a work environment, which we'll come to, but also in countries. Now, this is probably the easiest one to describe, bizarrely. With countries, we have these cultures and we have this community that drives a lot of what we experience and gives us meaning. So the easiest example, and I'm not American, although I lived there for quite a while, is the difference between Chinese Lunar New Year and Super Bowl weekend in the United States. They happen to happen around the same time in early February. Now, there is no way you could put an American into China on Chinese Lunar New Year and have them feel what it feels to go through New Year for a Chinese citizen. It means something to them. Now, although the American might go through all of the activities and the dinners and the whatevers, it just won't be the same. Likewise, for a Chinese national to come to to America, to go to America and experience all the activities of Super Bowl weekend, it's not going to mean the same thing. Super Bowl means the anticipation, as does Lunar New Year. Super Bowl means the organizing of the food. It means, again, the anticipation of kickoff, the first commercials, the talking about the commercials, the arguing about the games, the how do you bring everyone together in terms of this group dynamic. It means something to go through that Super Bowl weekend. So a Chinese national may go through the activities and tick them all off, but it won't have the same meaning. So again, you don't have to go looking far for meaning. There's meaning in everything, not everything perhaps, but most things that you do. It's just that we don't see it. In work, we also crave meaning, and it helps us get through our work life. Now, we know that if our work, we know we're working towards some greater goal, then that's all fantastic. But sometimes something like a middle manager having to retrench, say, a whole bunch of people, they're not going to feel great about that. But if they understand the context and the meaning behind what they're doing, then it will help them cope with it a lot better, rather than someone from on high saying, hey, /5 people, no explanation. And that works in a lot of activities that we do in our work. There is meaning there, but you have to kind of go and look for it. And it's incumbent upon the employer to give you some of that meaning. More on that over the coming weeks. So because we have some meaning in our lives and we don't have to look for the great one, we want more of it. We get this feeling of this meaning gives us a feeling of this is a good thing. Meaning is rarely a bad thing. Now, sometimes an event can create it can mean something horrible. It could be an anniversary date of someone tragically passing away in your family. So this little group of maybe 10 people has a particular meaning to a date on the calendar. So sometimes meaning is not a positive thing in that regard, but it still gives context. The day might mean something. So because we want this context, we want more of it. Now, why do we want the context? So let's dig a little bit deeper here. We know that as humans, we've got this process, this conscious mind, which is able to process different simulations. So, do I cross the river and cross the ravine, or do I go around the river to somewhere safer? So this whole question of do I cross or do I go around is a really fundamental one to humanity. We're able to decide risks, we're able to simulate risks because it avoids us having to do them. We don't have to go down that way, see what happened, and then come back, and go down that way, see what happened, and come back. We can get the pros and cons. The pros and cons seem quite simple, but then you start to dig on the pros and cons and you think to yourself, well, where do the pros and cons come from? What makes something a pro and something a con? This is where context comes in, because a positive to me might be a negative to you. So we need to create reason and context around things so we can make decisions, because the decision is not made in a vacuum. So by virtue of the fact that we make decisions, it means we need to have a decision-making processing tool, and that tends to be context, which is meaning. So we look for the meaning behind things, or we don't look for it, it just comes to us. But either way, it's there. So I know that if I do this certain activity, I won't do this certain activity, I don't like it, because there's some meaning attached to it, there's some history, there might be a cultural norm attached to it, for whatever reason. But that aids my decision-making process. It doesn't mean I'll make the right decision, but it means that I'll make a decision. It gives me a way to make those decisions. So we need these reasons behind, these reasons are the things that drive our decisions. So we roll all of this back up. This quest for meaning of life is not something that we need to chase too hard. It's something that we can find in our everyday activities. Now, there is a way to deal with this bigger question, and that's the topic of other videos. But for now, if we're just content in understanding there's meaning to just about everything that happens in our lives, then that might make us less stressed about doing this whole, what am I doing on this earth? Why am I here? Because you'll find it in a lot of small places rather than one great, big, grand place.